Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Eats Books, and I'm here today to bring you my October Reads video. This is the video where I wrap up every book that I read in the month of October. I actually had meant to do this in two separate videos, however, time just really got away from me this month. It was so much busier than I thought it was going to be. We had my birthday, we had family come in, the kids had a ton of after school activities, things to do on the weekends. It was just so busy. So the very little downtime that I did have this month, I just spent that kind of relaxing and binging TV. But anyway, I read a ton this month, so let's get into it. The first two books I'd like to talk about are two books that I tried. I did sort of like my own take on the try a chapter tag, and I tried 2 chapters of each one. I just wanted to see if it was something that I would be interested in reading. I'd been given these books. I didn't actually go out and purchase them myself. They were thrillers, so I thought maybe they would be good for the month of October, but after reading the first couple of chapters and seeing what they were about, I just was not into them, so I'm actually probably going to just get rid of them. The first one of those being I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh, and the second one was Lazy Eye by Jessica Treadway. Both of these kind of included like a courtroom drama type setting, and I'm not really into those right now, so I'm just going to give them away, and if I ever want to read them, I can pick them up from the library. Now let's get into the books that I did read. I'm going to start with my lowest ranked book and work my way up to my highest, as always. So my lowest ranked book this month was 3 stars. Actually, I had 2 3-star books. The first of those being The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. Now, y'all know I love me some Stephen King. I don't love everything that he's ever written, but when he's really good, he's really good. And this book was just okay. It followed the story of a girl who gets lost in the woods while her mother and brother are out hiking, and it just kind of follows her survival of being in those woods by herself. I thought it was all right. I felt like because you're getting pretty much a story from like one character's perspective for most of the time, it just kind of got really boring. I'm not one that likes long, drawn out like survival sequences in books. I really enjoy them in movies, but for some reason in books, I'm just not a fan of them. I want dialogue and action, and when it's just inner dialogue and some action, it just doesn't grab my fancy. So I just wasn't a huge fan of it, but would I own it? Absolutely, I already do. I'm glad that I do because it looks lovely on my shelf with the rest of my Stephen King collection. The first sentence in this book is, "The world had teeth and it could bite you with them anytime it wanted." The next book I picked up was Blood Sisters by Jane Corey. I picked this up for 2 reasons. One was for Lisa's Buddy Reads group hosted by Lisa from Books and Smiles. I will leave all the links down below if you guys ever want to join in on her Goodreads book club. It is so much fun. And the second reason was for Spookathon. This was the book that completed the challenge of read a book with a spooky word in the title, and blood to me is a very spooky word. I went into this book expecting sort of like one story, and I got something completely different because I don't read the synopsises of books. So for me, sometimes that is a good thing because I don't get spoiled about anything in the book. And sometimes that can be a bad thing because I'm going in with what I think the book is about, and that's really not what it is about, or it takes its time getting to that point and I'm a little confused. That was kind of what happened with this book because on the front it says 3 little girls, 1 good, 1 bad, 1 dead. So I went into this thinking we were going to get a story about these girls when they're still children and what happens, how one ends up dead. And we actually follow 2 of the girls when they are much older and they're sisters, and you kind of are learning about their relationship before there's even made mention really of what went on with them. So it was enjoyable. I will say that I gave it 3 stars, but that doesn't mean I didn't like it. I did like it. It was enjoyable. However, I found that this book just took too many twists and turns. I love a good psychological thriller. I love something that catches me off guard, but this just kept twisting and turning, and by the end, it was so convoluted. I just was like, okay, it's too much. And I ended up not enjoying the ending at all. So I definitely would pick up something else by Jane Corey because I feel like I enjoyed the writing enough I just hope it's a little bit of a better story, because you know me, I like to give authors at least 2 chances to impress me. So I would definitely pick up something else to see if maybe it was just this book I didn't agree with. Would I buy or own it? I actually bought this used on Amazon, but I'm probably just going to get rid of it because it's not something that I would ever read again. The first sentence in this book is careful. The next book that I read this month was one that I listened to as an audiobook, and that was One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This is a young adult novel that follows a group of students who end up having detention one day, and one of the students ends up dead. And then you're following the different perspectives of all the other students that were in detention, trying to figure out what happened and how this person ended up dead. It was a lot of fun. It definitely was reminiscent of The Breakfast Club in the beginning, and I feel like this is one of those books that if I had read a physical copy of it, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much as listening to the audiobook. The audiobook actually had a different narrator for each perspective, for each of the characters, which I really enjoyed, though it was a little confusing because when you switch from one perspective to the other, they would then talk in the other characters' voices, but they didn't use their actual voices from their perspective. So it took a little getting used to in the beginning for me, because I'm still fairly new to audiobooks, especially ones that have a full cast of narrators. So it was a little strange for me, but I ended up really enjoying it. Though there was one perspective, I think it was Addie's perspective, that the narrator for that I just did not like at all. So I was trying to really get through her sections. But the rest of the book was fun. It was definitely some twists and turns in there that I really enjoyed, and it did keep me kind of at least entertained while I was driving to and from work, or to and from picking kids up from different activities, or just out for my walks that I take during the week with the dog. So it was fun for that, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I don't have the first line because it is an audiobook. The next book that I read this month was Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This is a psychological thriller. It is one of those books that you really probably shouldn't know too much about before going in, because there are twists and turns that will definitely catch you a little off guard. And if you know some stuff beforehand, then that might ruin it for you. But I will say it kept me on my toes. It had decent writing. It did drag a little bit in certain sections. That's what detracted the scoring for me. And it's probably not one that I'm going to remember for a very long time. So I only rated it 3.5 stars, which is still a decent rating, but it just wasn't all that I hoped that it would be. Would I buy or own this book? I own it, and I'm probably going to give it away. The first line in this book is, pinch myself and say I'm awake once an hour. The next book that I picked up was Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This I picked up for Spookathon. It fulfilled the challenge of read a thriller. And I have to tell you, I read this very closely to Behind Her Eyes, and I keep getting their plots mixed up in my head. I cannot keep straight which one is which. Now that I've read my notes that I wrote down about it, I can remember, oh, this is what this book was about. But that just goes to show you that this book is not going to stay with me for very long. So I was hoping that it would be like one of those mind-blowing kind of thrillers, and it just wasn't for me. But it was fun. This follows the story of a couple, and very quickly you realize that their marriage is not all that it seems to be from the outside. Very interesting. However, I felt that there were many moments in this book that just did not feel authentic to me or realistic at all. I was just like, these situations that some of these characters are getting themselves into were just ridiculous. And I also didn't like the way that they used one of the characters' syndromes that she was born with, sort of as like a plot point. I don't know, maybe that's just my opinion, but it kind of bothered me. So it definitely detracted from my liking of the book. I rated this 3.5 stars. Would I buy or own it? I actually bought it, and now I'm kind of regretting that I did, because I'm probably not going to keep it. The first sentence in this book is, the champagne bottle knocks against the marble kitchen counter, making me jump. Now we are moving into my 4-star reads, and the first of those being Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by John Berendt. I picked this up for Spookathon as well, though I did not finish it during Spookathon. I started it right at the tail end of Spookathon and finished it the next week. This is a nonfiction book. This also fulfilled the challenge of read a book with orange on the cover. I picked this up because I was under the impression this had to do with a murder in Savannah, Georgia. So I thought it was going to be a little creepy, a little spooky, because it's a nonfiction account about a murder. However, it took into the second half of the book to actually get to the murder. So it wasn't really as creepy or spooky as I thought it was going to be, though I did really still enjoy it. The writing in this book was just exquisite. I loved it. I fell in love with just Savannah, Georgia, just because of his descriptions. You could tell he really loves the landscape of the city, which made me really love it, even though I've never been there, but I could picture it so vividly in my mind. The people that he chose to write about, there is a huge cast of characters. They are so unique and just so different from any of the people that I know in my real life that I am just like, I was sort of wowed. It kind of read like fiction only because I couldn't believe that some of these people were real and the accounts that he was telling were real. I did really enjoy it, but then towards the end, it turned into a courtroom drama type thing. And as I said earlier, I'm just not into courtroom dramas right now, and that kind of took 1 star away from it. So I liked it a lot. Would I buy or own this book? I own it, and I'm kind of sitting on the fence though. As much as I loved it, I don't know if I'd ever go back and reread it, which is one of my things that I need to be able to do in order to keep a book. I have to envision myself rereading it someday, and I just don't know if I can. But I may sit on it, I may keep it for a little while, and then make my decision later on. The first sentence in this book is, if I can get there, I should probably have these marked sometimes. I say that almost every wrap-up, and I never mark them. He was tall, about 50, with darkly handsome, almost sinister features, a neatly trimmed mustache, hair turning silver at the temples, and eyes so black they were like the tinted windows of a sleek limousine. He could see out, but you couldn't see in. The next book I picked up was The Heretics Daughter by Kathleen Kent, and I loved this book. It was so much fun to read. I picked this up for Spookathon. This fulfilled the challenge of read a book with a spooky setting. This is set in Salem, Massachusetts, and to me that has always been a spooky setting. This was during the witch trials, and this follows a family who several members were accused of being witches, though I will say the beginning is a little slow. It kind of builds up. You kind of learn about the background of this family and how this family works. So that way you are kind of really attached to the characters by the time you get to the point where they're being accused of witches. And I felt like that really worked for it. I rated this 4 stars, though I'm kind of teetering on a 4.5 now that some time has passed, because I really remember it and enjoyed it so much. Would I buy or own this book? I own it, and I think I may keep this one because I could picture myself doing a reread of this in a year or two. And it was just so much fun. I really want my daughter to read it too. So the first line in this book is, "The distance by wagon from Billerica to neighboring Andover is but 9 miles. The next 4-star read was Christina by Stephen King. I read this with my friend Liz. We did a buddy read, which is always fun. I love doing buddy reads. So if any of you want to buddy read anything, just let me know. I can't do a ton of them. I could probably do 1 or 2 a month because I do so many other readings, like for Goodreads groups, that it's kind of hard to balance them all. But I definitely love doing them. So if anyone else wants to ever read anything with me, if you see it on my TBR, just let me know. This is the story of a killer car. This boy, he finds this car, he ends up buying it, and you start to suspect that there's something off with his relationship with the car, and the car itself just gives off these very sinister vibes. I really enjoyed it. I will say there were some moments with Stephen King's writing that as I'm getting older and rereading his books, I'm starting to pick them apart a little bit. So my enjoyment of them does go down sometimes slightly. There were some moments in here that just really were off-putting as far as the way he talked about women at times and the way he talked about, there was like a few evil characters and he talked about how fat they were and how sort of like nasty that was. And that did put me off this book just a touch, because I'm just more sensitive to that now. However, that was in the beginning, and once we got past that point, both Liz and I started to enjoy the book a lot more. It did take off 1 star for me though. This could have been a 5-star read for me, but it definitely took off a star for that. It was also a little slow in parts, which seems to be the MO for Stephen King's books. He does drag things out just a little bit longer than they need to be. But when it was good, and I have to tell you, when his writing is good, it's really fantastic. It really just sinks right into my soul and like makes me so scared and creeped out. It was a perfect October read. So if you're ever looking for something creepy to read in the month of October, this is definitely one to pick up. Would I buy or own it? I actually own it, and I'm glad that I do because it looks lovely on my shelf with the rest of my collection. The first sentence in this book is, "Oh my God," my friend Arnie Cunningham cried out suddenly. The next 4-star read that I read this month was my one fantasy book, I think, of the month. I normally read a couple of fantasy books, and I only read one because I was so focused on thrillers and other books. That was Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. This is book 1 in the Greatcoat series. This book was one, when I first started reading it, I got 5-star tingles. I was like, this is fantastic. I loved the cast of characters. It's kind of like a Three Musketeers vibe to it, and the 3 friends, I was really into their banter and their wittiness and just how they were interacting. What dropped this down a star for me is that partway into the book, one of those characters branches off on their own, and you follow that story. And once he kind of got split from his friends, it didn't have quite the same magic as when they were all together. And I just kept waiting for the moment when they would be reunited. And when they were, I was so right back into the story. Like, not that I didn't enjoy the part where he was separated, because I did. I just didn't enjoy it as much as when they were all together. So it didn't quite reach 5 stars for me, but it reached 4, and it was a solid 4. I like really loved this book, and I cannot wait to jump into the next book in the series, though that might have to wait because I have some other fantasy books to catch up on. But whenever I get the second book, I'm going to be so excited. Would I buy or own this? I would definitely, as of right now, own this. I'd have to see how the rest of the books in the series go to determine whether I want to buy them all. But right now I would own it because I would definitely go back and reread this at some point. The first sentence in this book is, "Pretend just for a moment that you have attained your most deep-seated desire." The last book I have to talk about is The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. I picked this up for Books and Jams read-along group on Goodreads, which is hosted by Krista from Books and Jams, who is here on BookTube. I will leave her channel link as well as her Goodreads link down below. I'm so glad I joined in this month because this has become one of my new favorite books. This was a 5-star read for me. It's so hard to kind of describe what this book's about. Basically, you get the perspective of a girl who's brought over from Ireland during the time of slavery. She is forced to become a slave in this household, but you see things from her perspective, and you see slavery sort of from her perspective because all the other slaves obviously do not have her same skin color. She cannot understand why she's kind of kept at arm's length from them. They keep telling her that she doesn't belong with them, but she also doesn't belong with the people of the big house. So who does she belong with? And you also get the perspective from another character who is an offspring between a slave and the owner of the house. It's very complicated and it sounds complicated, but when you read the story, it really doesn't feel that way. You learn so many things. Oh, there's my puppy saying hello. Sit, Minnie. My puppy saying hello. She was good during my whole filming process, but I guess on this video she decided she wanted to come over and say hi. Yeah, it does not feel complicated when you're reading it. It's not very large. It's, I want to say 300 pages, 350-ish pages, and it packs so much into this book, but it doesn't feel rushed. and it also doesn't feel unrealistic. There's a lot of heartache and heartbreak in this book, and it just really tore my insides like open. I was just like a complete sobbing mess by the end of the book. It was such an emotional roller coaster, but the writing was fantastic, and I had just never read a book from this perspective before, and I thought it was very unique. I want to say that this may be my favorite book of the year so far, but I don't want to go that far because I have to kind of reflect back on what I've read and kind of put that together in December when I do my end of the year lists, but it's definitely up there. I know that there is a second book in this, I guess it's a duology right now, and I know that there's a second book, and I know April from Getting Hygge With It has started it and read it, and she really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to pick that up. I'm hoping to do that in December, but we will see where my TBR takes me. Would I buy or own this book? I would buy it in a heartbeat. I already added this and its sequel to my Amazon wish list. The first line in this book is, "There was a strong smell of smoke and a new fear fueled me." So those were all the books that I read in the month of October. What did you guys read? Did you read anything that you absolutely loved? Did you read anything that was just okay to you? Anything that you hated? Let me know. I had really hoped that I would have this out sooner, and I still have to film my TBR and my book haul and stuff, but I cannot do that today because I'm on my way to the doctor's with a sick child. But I will try to get them out as soon as I can. Anyway, I hope you guys had a great reading month, and happy reading.